Hey everyone, Matt Thomas here. Thanks for watching. So this video is going to be about how to get our students to talk in class, and it's going to be based on neuroscience and behavioral psychology. So as teachers, we want to create an environment that encourages communication, and that's what this video is going to focus on. The science behind this. Okay, if you haven't seen my previous video on how the brain really learns, it's linked to this slideshow. Please watch that. It'll give you complete, in detail, how the brain really learns. We're going to talk about modeling behavior and the importance on that. If you haven't seen my video on creating an effective classroom environment, please watch that first. It'll completely explain the importance of modeling behavior. And of course, we're going to talk about dopamine. And if you haven't seen my video on the importance of dopamine in the classroom, please watch that video as well. So let's first talk about how our brain learns and makes meaning. So our brain goes through a series of action, prediction, and reaction. So once we experience an action, our brain takes that action and filters it through every previous experience we've had based on that action, predicts what's about to happen, and then tells our body how to feel. So for example, if a teacher now is asking the students to respond, there's the action. Our students' brain's going to be filtering, a teacher asking them to respond through every previous experience they've had with raising their hand. And depending on their experience that they've had in the past, whenever they raise their hand, their body is going to predict what is going to happen next and then give their individual body a reaction. Now, if students have had a great experience with raising their hand in the past, they're going to feel much more confident when raising their hand with, in that class with that teacher. If the students have not had a good experience every time they've raised their hand, then their brain is going to say, hey, every time you raise your hand, this happens, so I don't think you want to raise your hand this time. So that is so very important to understand, because we want to create an environment where when we ask our students a question, they have already had great experiences every time we've asked them a question and they've responded. We've set up such a great, effective environment for them, an environment where they feel confident, being able to respond in class or talk in class. And so their brain's going to go, yeah, go ahead and respond to this. This teacher's great. You're going to feel great. This teacher's going to make you feel really good for responding. We want to create that environment. So on your screen here is a checklist of what's very important for us to do as teachers to get our students to communicate more often in class. We're just going to focus on the first 4 here because the rest will come along, later on in the presentation. So as teachers, if we want our students to respond to our questions or get them talking in class, we have to give them something that's worth talking about. We have to make sure that the questions that we ask in class connect with the students. We want to make sure the topics are relatable, because if we do that, then we're more apt to having, communication in the classroom. If we are asking our students a question that will connect with them personally, if we want to create prior knowledge with a topic, it's important that as teachers, we also show our own vulnerability. We also respond to the question, giving our own personal story. And that's important to do before you ask the students for their response. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes here. It's very important as teachers that we invite students to respond rather than demand that they do. We'll talk about that as well. And body language is so important when creating an effective environment for communication. How we stand, how we listen, how we respond to the students speaking will set up or establish if our students will respond later on in the class or in the week or in the year, throughout the year. We'll talk about that as well. So the first thing we want to talk about is making the questions relatable. If we want our students to communicate more in class, we have to give them something that they're interested in. We have to make sure that the topics that we're asking them to respond to is something that they actually care about. We need to get the students interested. Now, curiosity and interest is the first and foremost, most important part of learning. If you haven't seen my videos relating to that, please watch them. I do have a new video coming out about the importance of curiosity and why it is the first and foremost most important part of learning. So as teachers, we want to create questions that are important and spark interest in the students. Then we want to ask the question that pertains to the overall topic or the theme of the lesson. So let's say, for example, as an English teacher, which I am, if I'm teaching Scarlet Letter, and if you're sure, Scarlet Letter is about a person who does something in her past and the community judges her for her. That's the overall theme of the novel. And so if I want to spark interest and I want my students to communicate, if I were teaching Scarlet Letter, I may say, hey guys, I may start class this way to spark their curiosity. Hey everyone, let me tell you about the time I got arrested when I was 14. So now my students are curious, huh? So I tell them the story about how I got arrested for shoplifting when I was 14. And on the screen, you'll see that I reference 2 and 2. The story should only go 2 minutes long, no longer than that, because we want to spark their curiosity. We don't want to tell an entire story and bore them to death. So a quick 2-minute story. Then, so I've told them a story. Then if I want them to respond, then what I do is I ask them, hey everyone, can I ask you, if you don't mind, please writing down, when was a time that you did something that maybe you're ashamed of or you're embarrassed of, only if you feel comfortable saying it. And tell them, like, I won't be, speaking these out, just something you're ashamed of or embarrassed that you're glad that you're not judged forever for. And so give them 2 minutes to write a quick write. Remember, 2 and 2. So a quick write is designed to be a quick write. It's their quick initial thoughts. It's not necessarily meant to be a long reflection. That's a different type of writing. So you start with a 2-minute story. Now keep in mind, I've already shown my vulnerability. I've said, hey, this is what I did in the past. This is what I'm ashamed of at time. Can I ask you guys, if anyone doesn't mind, for 2 minutes, please write down something you're ashamed of and that you're glad you overcame. And so, again, that connects to Scarlet Letter. That leads into the whole topic. If I'm doing autobiographical narrative, I'll start class and I'll say, hey, guys, let me tell you about the time I got jumped outside of Carl's Jr. when I was 16. Now I've sparked their interest. Remember, I'm setting up, giving them something to talk about, something relatable to them. And then I tell them the story, just 2 minutes long. And then I tell them how I learned a valuable lesson at that time. And then I ask them, guys, can I ask you, please take 2 minutes, write about a time that you've experienced something that you learned a very valuable lesson in. So now I've got them writing. Then I've already shown vulnerability by telling my own story. I'm modeling what I want to see the students, what I want to see from the students, right? I'm giving them my story. Now, here's the part where I want to have them communicate and to talk. And so here's how I have to set this up. How you ask your students to communicate, to talk, well, really decide if they're going to want to respond or not. So here's what the first things. Here's my don't says. Here's how you do not want to phrase the question. What you don't want to do is ask, okay, everyone, who wants to share? You don't want to ask that because there are many people who do want to share, but it's when it's phrased that way, they now have to make the decision, do I want to share or not? And if you're like me, who's an observer and reflector, someone who tends not to talk a lot in class, not because I'm shy, but because I like to take in everybody's information first, process it, then maybe decide if I want to share. I've just cut those students out because they're not going to be the first to respond. So you also don't want to say, does anyone have any questions? Or does anyone want to share in the case of me trying to get them to communicate? Because now, as an observer reflector as I am, I now again have to make an additional decision. Do I really have any questions? Do I really want to share? So how you phrase that is very important. I definitely would not make a joke about it. If you're not getting students to share, let's say you're asking them to respond to something, whether it's a quick write or, all right, guys, who has the answer to number 2? Don't make a joke about it if nobody responds. Don't say, I don't bite. Come on, I don't bite. Ha, ha, ha. Or, come on, don't be shy. You don't want to tell. Okay, the way you phrase, if you say, don't be shy, or you guys are normal, I know you're normally my quiet class, but I know this is my quiet class, but when you tell your students what they are, they will respond back by being that way. It's the same reason why if you tell your students, gosh, I love you guys. I'm so glad I'm here teaching you every single day. Thank you guys so much for being so wonderful for me. Then your students are going to be wonderful for you, right? Set that expectation up. But when you set the expectation up, hey, first period, I know this is my quiet class. Of course they're going to be your quiet class because you've told them that it's okay to be that. So I would stay away from those. Here's how I would then ask my students to respond. First, I would invite rather than demand. So after I'm done telling my story, and after the students are done writing their quick write, or after you're done explaining something on the board, then I would say it this way. Okay, guys, can I ask you please, what do you guys think about so-and-so? Or can I ask, if it's my quick write, can I ask, would someone mind please sharing, was there a time that you did something you're like, man, I'm ashamed about that, but I'm so glad I'm not, continue to be judged based on that. And so the way you ask, can I ask you please, setting up that way, what do you guys think about? So you're establishing like that they've already thought about it. What do you guys think? I would also say something like this. Would someone mind please sharing your thoughts based on so-and-so? So you're inviting, would someone mind please sharing your thoughts? Can I ask, is there a time where you learned a valuable lesson that you don't mind sharing? So again, I'm inviting them to speak rather than demanding them to speak. And that's so very important. Then comes the body language. While you're asking them to speak, then you step forward. You take that step forward. So rather than standing back and like, all right, who wants to share? Take a step forward. All right, can I ask, would someone mind please sharing? Opening your hands up. It's inviting when your arms are open. So you step forward. Does someone mind please sharing? And scan the room. Have a little bit of almost a smile, like someone mind please sharing, like your eyebrows are lifted. You're like looking for that response. And step forward, opening hands up. You're inviting the students to respond. When you get someone to respond, and if you've created this great environment for responses, you will get someone to respond. When you get someone, take a little step towards them. Oh, Joey, please, thank you so much. Make sure you react to them. As soon as that hand goes up, don't just say go or you or yes. Don't say that. They helped you out by responding and raising their hand. Praise that. Oh, Joey, thank you so much. Put your hand out, extend it, take a step forward. Now it shows that you're listening to Joey. When your student is now sharing the response, make sure you listen and react to whatever that student is saying. If it's a happy story or a funny story, raise those eyebrows, like smile, like laugh when something funny is said, right? Respond, look at them and actively respond. If it's something like concerning or a negative time in their life that they're sharing, they're being very vulnerable, like do the head nod and be like, oh my gosh, wow. Have these little not micro expressions, these little subtle responses like, oh my gosh, like you're really actively listening to them. If I'm in class and my students are reciting a poetry, if a poem that they wrote, if I say, hey guys, if someone doesn't mind, would someone mind please sharing the poem that they wrote? Like very positive. When someone does respond, oh, Joey, thank you so much. Now, when Joey's reciting his poem, you're listening and you're responding like, wow, right? When they use like this great rhyming scheme or this great like phrase that they wrote, and you're like, oh my gosh, like reactions. And then when Joey's done, be like, oh my gosh, that was so amazing. Then it's always great to repeat a quote that Joey said. So it shows that I'm really, really paying attention. Oh my gosh, I love when you said this and this. Wow, round of applause. That was amazing. And make sure you give that round of applause, right? Give that reaction. You can do a round of applause, each individual speaker, or collectively after everyone's done. I like to do each individual speakers. And so the reason this is so important is because it sets up dopamine. When your students come to class for the first time, they're not going to be sure what kind of teacher you are. And so this is very important to establish at the beginning of the year, right? So let's say it's the first part of the year and you're asking your first question, whatever that question may be. That's the time when students are testing you out. They're not sure what kind of teacher you are. When you get a student to raise his or her hand, praise that student. Oh, Joey, thank you so much. Then when Joey gives his response, oh, that was awesome. Thank you so much, guys. And then who else? So you got your first response, then invite others. Who else? Rather than who else wants to share? Because again, if you ask that, you're alienating the people that are the observer reflectors that have to decide, do I want to share or not? Invite them. Guys, who else? Please. Oh, Joey, thank you so much. Oh, Johnny, thank you so much. And as soon as they're done speaking, then praise again. Gosh, I really appreciate it. Thank you. What you're doing is you're creating dopamine in the students. So the students who responded are now getting positive praise. They like positive praise. So their brain's going to go, oh, whenever Mr. Thomas asks someone to respond in class, he always makes us feel good. And when we're done, he makes us feel good again. I like that. I like feeling good about myself. So every time Mr. Thomas asks a question, my brain's going to go, ooh, I want to respond. But the thing is, too, it's so valuable because now other students in the class are seeing that. And other students are going, wow, whenever Mr. Thomas asks a question and someone gives a response, he praises them. I want to be praised as well. And that's going to really help the students who normally don't like to raise their hand in class because they're not sure how the response is going to be. It encourages them to keep responding in class and to raise their hand as well. So here's some final things that I would highly suggest. When a student is giving the response, whatever it is, I use English because I'm an English teacher, but if you're a math teacher or a science teacher, when a student's giving a response, make sure you listen. Don't judge on that response. It's not a time for a lecture. Listen to the response, then, actively listen, then make sure that you praise after that response. So once the response is given, oh my God, Joey, thank you so much. Even if it's in math, like, okay, who's got the answer to number 3? And then if Johnny raises his hand, oh, Johnny, thank you. Praise them before they speak. It's 24. Oh my gosh, you're right. Thank you so much. Right? So you're praising before they speak. You're praising them after you speak. Make sure as they're saying, make sure you're listening to them as well. If it's something that as a teacher you haven't necessarily heard before, or if it's a response that's just so valuable, overpraise them. So if I'm sitting there and I ask a question like, hey, Great Gatsby, Tom and Daisy, and what's up with that? Or you're trying to ask like, what do you guys think about the relationship between these characters? And a student goes, oh, I was thinking this and this. If it's something that you really liked, you've never heard, praise them for that. Like, oh my gosh, Joey, I got to tell you, I've been teaching for 19 years. You're the first person that's ever said that. Guys, give Joey a round of applause. That was awesome. Or maybe you've heard it before, but it's the first person that said it today. Praise him for that. Dude, no one else has said that today. That's amazing. So try and find ways to overpraise. Then also, it's not bad to expand on a student's great idea. So if a student says something great and you want to expand it, don't make it your story. Make sure it's their answer. Don't take credit for it. But as they're answering, when they're done, be like, oh my gosh, Joey, that is so great. Your great idea made me think of this. So again, you're praising their great idea. You're making sure they get ownership for it. And it's always great to do rounds of applauses. Not on everything. You don't want to overdo something. But if it's something that's worthy of a round of applause, if it's a personal story, or if it's something that at the end of, if you're a science class, at the end of all the time you've asked people to respond and they had great answers, you're like, guys, this is why your class is so wonderful. Guys, round of applause for the people that responded. Go ahead and give those rounds of applause. It's very important. Okay, so let's get to our final topic. What if they still don't talk? So I can tell you sincerely, the 19 years that I was teaching, I never really had an issue of students not talking. But I'm going to be vulnerable here. There are times when I did ask for responses that I didn't get. I didn't get responses. So what do? Here's the thing. As a teacher, I had to decide if the topic or the question that I asked deserved a response. So some items don't need a response. Let's say I ask a vulnerable question. And so I'm talking about Scarlet Letter or autobiographical narrative, and I give my personal story, and I have the students write, and then I ask, guys, does someone mind sharing a time that you learned a valuable lesson that's kind of stuck with you for the rest of your life? Guys, does someone mind sharing? And I'm looking around, and I'm inviting, but it's still not coming out. I go, okay, does my response further the lesson? And in that case, if it doesn't, I go, I don't need a response. So I'll say, okay, guys, no problem at all. Let's continue on. I'll just gloss over it. If I need a response to further the lesson, then I will tell them, guys, I'm so sorry. You know that I don't normally call on people. Would someone mind? I do need a response on this one. Does someone mind, please, helping me out? Now you're asking for help. Now, if you've established this great relationship in class, your students will want to help you out. And so you might get the one student that's like, yeah, is it this? Like, they may give you just a little response. Praise that. Because remember, you didn't get any responses before. Praise it. Like, Joey, you're right. Like, what you're saying is, and then maybe reiterate and expand on that answer. And then praise them. Thank you so much. And then, further the lesson. So, some items don't necessarily need a response. Just move on. It's all good. Some items, if you need a response to further the lesson, then just ask. I'm sorry, as you know, I don't call on people normally, but I have to. Does someone mind please giving me something? And then they'll share the response with you, and then make sure you praise that. So there we go. This how we get our students to communicate. How we set up at the beginning of the year is so very valuable to setting up communication all throughout the year. Make sure you praise the responses that your students give. Make sure you give them a topic that's worthy of a response, something that's interesting for them. Make sure when they respond to you, you praise them before they respond. Listen to the response, praise them after they respond, and make sure that you invite them to talk rather than demand them to. Thanks for watching.